Hey. Oh boy, what it takes to get back on to be able to do a podcast. Oh boy. How you guys doing? I miss you guys. I've been I've been so busy. I've been just killing myself. It's not healthy at all. Too too exhausted. I've been doing a lot. Doing a lot. I gotta get these movies released and it's just been a oh, but also I love my podcast, and then I be talking to myself so much, and it's like I'm seeing so much coverage, just totally terrible, and you're just trying to figure out like, okay, really, um, is this ever going to be put in the history, in the record book accurately? In this Iran war is pretty bad. Excuse me for my yarning. I tell myself I'm not gonna do it anymore, but I'm so time is not my friend. I tell you, you know what I mean. It's just a lot of work, a lot of see me, even my facial hair growing out. I'm just gonna let it grow. Take care of myself. But I told myself I'll just grow out my beard. I'm not gonna till I'm done with the goals and the things that I'm trying to accomplish and everything. I'll cut it off after I clear myself. Okay. We got a lot to get into, y'all. This is so crazy. Look, I know most people hate Trump. I get it. I understand. I totally get it. And he is such a great like situation, or just him stepping up to the front line in the last 12 to 15 years. It's been, I think it's one of the best things that ever happened to America. But at the same time, I understand people don't like the birther issue with President Obama and everything. And I think I don't really put a lot of fault to Trump for how hard he went at Obama, because Obama, he was pretty messy as a president, and it just didn't work out in the best for America what Obama did to the country. It just wasn't. And then the average person, it kind of made people like be in a more submissive, against their best interests. I'm sorry, against their best interest mindset. And he elevated himself into a high economic capitalism, money grab type of situation. But his advocacy and how he communicates, he touts to not be greedy, not be money hungry, not be like thinking of capitalism and accomplishments and goals and getting it, and then it's the total opposite than what Obama did when Obama's doing Obama. He's very go-getter, he's aggressive, he's very self-centered and very in results to his life and his family. And I always tell people, one of the major problems I have with social media people, politicians, celebrities, people of grandeur in society, successful people, is that they won't tell the masses the most important thing for you in your life is your own grandeur, is your own prosperity, is your own grandness. And if you try to do this morale and this humane mindset, you'll lose every single time. Every single time. And don't take my word, y'all know it. If you're old enough, you should see it and you should know it. So, uh, so, so when you see a person like Trump and he feels like he's trying to right all the political and social issues of our country and get into the quagmire of the Middle East and what is going on here, what is these people, and what is the mindset of these people, and then you take previous knowledge and equate it to how you should go at what's popping off right now. And that may not be in your best interest, but Trump is alone out there. He lost a lot of people like Nick Fortes and Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and all these. This was Trump's enemies anyway. You know what I mean? When it counted, they were for Ted Cruz. They were for a lot of other stuff. They were for Bush and they was for passive stuff. They was not for Trump. When the time, well, they had to grow to like him. They had to grow to want to deal with him. They had to grow to take him serious. You get what I'm saying? Like, but all of them, they had to be browbeat by Trump's winning and by the people wanting Trump, that they complied with saying, wow, we got to try to find some common ground with this guy. And fast forward to now, all they doing is retracting back to who they always was. And they were anti-Trump. You know what I mean? So, and I get it. I understand stuff. And even my criticism of Trump today through this podcast is going to be pretty brutal. Because it's two things that Trump, if he learned anything or if history is going to show, it's two things that he absolutely couldn't. He couldn't give any latitude to. He couldn't give any kind of ground to. He couldn't compromise on. One is every single illegal immigrant, if you're here illegally, every single illegal immigrant, it was best for the survival of the country that he kick all of them out. That he grab them all. I don't care if it's kids, I don't care if it's family, all of them. You gotta grab them out. That's how bad the country is in the situation. It needs a triage. It needs emergency surgery. And that surgery is not pretty because you're gonna cut stuff off. You're gonna kind of, take things out, and you're gonna have to kind of do some major reconstruction of the body, or in the surgery of it, you're gonna have to do some major things to make it work and make the body survive. So in order to make the body survive, you could not compromise on 10 to 25 million illegal immigrants getting deported immediately. And that he gave into that because he gave into businesses and the working structure of the country and the economics of the GDP and all that stuff, and he just couldn't do it. He felt like it was just not going to be good for the country overall. You're going to be seeing the aftermath of that for the next couple of years, I think. In addition to that, we all want to protect Israel, but do you compromise the safety and well-being of the country in the actual soldiers, our soldiers? I know they're warriors and they're bred in, and their whole point of military is for death. I get that. But do you compromise our soldiers and our country and your political power all for the state of Israel. Is that the right? Is that what you're supposed to kind of use your political capital on in your last term, your last possible 4 years as a president? And I'm thinking it doesn't look good. Doesn't really look good. So I told myself I want to come in and just kind of, I'm going to throw some things at you guys, but it's in context of we're ignorant as Americans. We don't understand this, the Middle East. We don't understand what's going on. We don't understand how it might be affecting the things that we're doing and how our lives are, and just how our politicians look at what their job is in the totality of taking care of the country, taking care of American citizens, and also having a watchful eye to what's going on outside our borders and trying to manage it all. I just think we're too ignorant to understand it. I think when you look at people like Candace Owens, they're so ignorant to logic and always staying in context. Always staying in context, that they go on these rabbit holes and they come out of context. And if you look at the body of work and the communication, it's unstable and it's got holes in it, and it has no validation over long periods of time. And I said, okay, I gotta do something to give the people something to watch, something to understand what happened and what's going to happen, or somebody to say, okay, this is what's going on, and we gotta have accountability to what is going on. Okay, so I started off a half an hour later than I wanted to, technically about an hour or so later than I wanted to, because I had to do the thumbnail. I had to try to figure out what clips that I wanted to use and everything like that. And it's just so brutal. It is so brutal trying to get this to you guys, you know what I mean? And trying to give you context to what I'm seeing and what I want to talk about, and just the heartbreaking of, you know, like what Trump going through. Like it's not about liking Trump. It's more about like, geez, like we really, I just don't know anymore. I just don't know anymore. Are we strong enough to survive the damage that's been done by the Democrats? You know what I mean? It's so much damage done that it's really where this country is a shell of itself now. You know, and then I always told everybody, when you really look at the history of this country and what happened to this country over the last 30, 40 years, you'll see that Republicans and conservatives and Christians, they destroyed the country. You know what I mean? Like, they really hurt the country. They really put us in a bad situation. Why? Because they tout themselves as the moral conscious of the situation, but in their morality, a venture that they're on, they really kind of been passive to things that needed to be handled. You know what I mean? And by being passive like that, it really destroyed America. It really did. Okay, so I'm trying to not make this a long one, you guys, but drinking some water. Oh, yeah, I'm dehydrated. That shows right there. That was almost a gulp. But I'm gonna walk you guys through it. So you understand that Iran, we just President Trump just gave the go ahead war to Iran, and the spill out is pretty brutal. It's pretty crazy. So there's a real consequence. It's a real decision that he made that he's not going to be able to sweep it under the rug as like a 1 week issue situation. This is gonna stay with him forever, and it's gonna be how people judge him forever. Like literally, it's that brutal. Some people say it's good, but when you start to lose American soldiers' lives, and I'll get into that, and most of the soldiers' lives that we lost, like they were killed, not like on the battlefield of Iran. It was almost like just being in a base in Saudi Arabia or in a country and in our country not anticipating Iran was willing to actually do what they didn't think they was willing to do, but they left themselves open because they just couldn't conceive them doing it. And they did what they didn't think that they would do, but it was an option for them to do it. So it was a soft point for our military bases, and we lost American soldiers. Like, it's the weakest way to lose American soldiers, because we didn't have protection of our base in Saudi Arabia. Like, we supposed to trust the skies of Saudi Arabia to Saudi Arabia. That's crazy. No, we protect our soldiers. You know what I mean? How do we don't know stuff that's coming into the borders of Qatar and Saudi Arabia and all that stuff that's aiming towards our military base? And we so cocky that we think that our base is not gonna get attacked on enemy territory. That's crazy. It's wow. So, in order for you to even understand the ideology of Iran, why they keep getting in major conflict with Israel, why they keep getting in major conflicts with Saudi Arabia and Sunni and Shiite and stuff like that, to understand Sunni, Shiite, Zionism, we gotta have this conversation. And I hope I don't get flagged. I'm just giving logical analyzation of the Middle East and kind of what you need to understand going forward. Okay, so all this is YouTube. All this is perspectives that they have, information that they have on YouTube. So I'm gonna try to navigate through this without getting flagged, but I don't know. I might get flagged. You get what I'm saying? I don't know. So we're gonna start off with what's the difference between Shiite and Sunni Islam, okay? And we'll have a more conversation once we kind of get to understand this a little bit better, okay? So let's get started.
Sunnis and Shia both practice Islam, but what's the difference? A disagreement 1,400 years ago over one simple question: who would lead the Muslim community following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD? Some believed that the Prophet Muhammad's cousin Ali was the rightful immediate heir, while others thought Abu Bakr, one of his oldest friends, was the better choice. Today, they share a lot of similar beliefs and practices, but Shia believe religious leadership must come from the Prophet Muhammad's descendants, while Sunnis don't. Of the 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, about 87 to 90% are Sunni and 10 to 13% are Shia.
Get that? Wow. That's wow. So 13% of the Muslim population is the terrorists almost. Like the wow radicals. And I'm not gonna say all of them, but it's like that's crazy. You know, I see. I gotta watch what I'm saying already. Look, I'm commentating. It's all alleged. It's all my personal opinion. I gave you my disclaimer before the show started. Okay, let's do. I want to go over that a little bit more in detail because that's once you think about that, it's like wow.
Sunnis and Shia both practice Islam, but what's the difference? A disagreement 1400 years ago over one simple question. Who would lead the Muslim community following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD? Some believed that the Prophet Muhammad's cousin Ali was the rightful immediate heir, while others thought Abu Bakr, one of his oldest friends, was the better choice. Today,
So Ali is a woman?
they share a lot of similar beliefs
Okay, so Shia is the female. Well, I guess. Well, I guess that's what they said. Interesting.
and practices, but Shia believe religious leadership must come from the Prophet Muhammad's descendants, while Sunnis don't. Of the 1.
So Sunnis don't think so. So they're the more freestyle. Okay, I just want to catch this really quick and stuff. Well, I'm reacting right with you guys. Okay, so Muhammad and the descendant of Muhammad is Fatima. I guess that's how you pronounce it. And Ali and Fatima gave birth to Hussein and Hassan, right? I'm thinking that's what it is, right? So that's interesting. So a descendant will be Fetna. Okay. I want to listen to it again. I'm sorry. This is new for me, guys. And I told myself I wanted to kind of learn with you guys. So let's go.
Who would lead the Muslim community following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD? Some believed that the Prophet Muhammad's cousin Ali was the rightful immediate heir, while others thought Abu Bakr, one of his oldest friends, was the better choice.
Yeah, see, that's radical. Obviously, a descendant of his family will be the actual rightful heir. You know what I mean?
Of his oldest friends was the better choice.
So even if the person was a great leader or a great offshoot of Muhammad was his friend, he's not bloodline. Bloodline will be a descendant. You know what I mean?
Cousin Ali was the rightful immediate heir, while others thought Abu Bakr, one of his oldest friends, was the better choice. Today, they share a lot of similar beliefs and practices, but Shia believe religious leadership must come from the Prophet Muhammad's descendants.
Ah, that's interesting. Let me get that last part again, because
Similar beliefs and practices, but Shia believe religious leadership must come.
So Shiites, they think that the leadership should come from a descendant.
From the Prophet Muhammad's descendants, while Sunnis don't.
So descendants think like just the religion can be kind of offshoot to anyone, you know what I mean? Or any, like, you know, teachings and stuff like that. As long as it's the teaching of the Quran, it doesn't matter who's the leaders are, you know. That's interesting.
1.6 billion Muslims in the world, about 87 to 90% are Sunni, and 10 to 13% are Shia.
So 10 to 13% are Shiites. Shiites are the ones who believes that it should leadership of the Quran and the Islam religion should be given and professed by a descendant, you know. And the leader of the movement should be by descendant. And Sunni is the majority of the population. That 90% of all Muslims think that it should just, as long as you're learning it and understanding it and following the religious teachings accurately, it doesn't matter who the leadership is. You know what I mean? So that's kind of interesting. That's really interesting. So I'm going to play that one more time just so we can drill it in our head and we can be a little bit more understanding what's the difference between Iran and Saudi Arabia. You get what I'm saying? You know, stuff like that, because that's the difference. That's that we're too ignorant as Americans to really understand that there's a difference in teachings and how you profess the Quran and the religion of Islam. And that conflict is like that's where you get your radical stuff from. And the Shiites, they're very small, but they're very strong.
Sunnis and Shia both practice Islam, but what's the difference? A disagreement 1,400 years ago over one simple question. Who would lead the Muslim community following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD? Some believed that the Prophet Muhammad's cousin Ali was the rightful immediate heir, while others thought Abu Bakr, one of his oldest friends, was
So his cousin Ali is the descendant from him. Wow.
the better choice. Today, they share a lot of similar beliefs and practices, but Shia believe religious leadership must come from the Prophet Muhammad's descendants, while Sunnis don't. Of the 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, about 87 to 90% are Sunni and 10 to 13% are Shia.
Okay. AJ plus Ajira. Okay. So that's all on YouTube, y'all. So I'm not pulling anything from YouTube that they haven't approved. Okay. Okay, we're gonna go to the next thing. Because I always want to give you guys something that's coming from, Muslim like communication, like Ajira that's televised and communication and media from the Muslim community and stuff like that. So now simplify it and give it to you from our American journalism perspective. Okay.
When we watch the news and see reporters talking about the conflicts that are playing out across the Middle East, we hear a lot about fighting between the Sunnis and the Shiites, the two main sects of Islam. But many of us have no idea what the difference between the two groups is and why there is so much friction between them. So let's take a look at some of the history and the geopolitics to get a sense of what is really going on. There are 1.6 billion Muslims across the world. Roughly 85% of them are Sunnis. The division began after the death of the Prophet Muhammad some 1,400 years ago as a disagreement about who should succeed him. The Sunnis felt that Abu Bakr, a close friend of the Prophet's, ought to be the next Muslim leader. But the Shiites claimed that Muhammad had anointed his son-in-law Ali as rightful successor. The Sunnis won out, but a split was born, and that rift was cemented when Ali's son was later killed by the ruling Sunni troops, an event which the Shiites commemorate every year.
Oh, wow. Woohoo! See how informed you getting when somebody, you got to communicate this stuff right, because we can't just keep being ignorant to it. That is interesting. See how much detail that they give you in the journalism? Okay, let's look at that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I won't interrupt. I will try not to interrupt.
Some 1,400 years ago as a disagreement about who should succeed him. The Sunnis felt that Abu Bakr, a close friend of the Prophet's, ought to be the next Muslim leader. But the Shiites claimed that Muhammad had anointed his son-in-law Ali as rightful successor. The Sunnis won out, but a split Muhammad had anointed his son-in-law Ali.
So his son-in-law, so that's not even like a descendant, you know what I mean? Because I guess he had a daughter or something, right? So the Shia, so the daughter's husband, the Shiites want him to be the pretty much the leader of the Muslim race and stuff. And the Sunnis, they like, hey, his best friend has been following him and all that stuff and been with his teaching. And the Sunnis, they pretty much had the power, because if they kind of killed off the son-in-law, that's pretty hardcore.
As rightful successor. The Sunnis won out, but a split was born, and that rift was cemented when Ali's son was later killed by the ruling Sunni troops.
Ali's son-in-law, right?
Event which the Shiites commemorate every year.
So Shiites is 90% of the they say Shia, and they say Shiites in the documentary of how they spell it. So Iran is 90% Shiites. Wow, so they're radical. I mean, not radical, but they're, you know. But at the same time, Sunnis radical because they killed the son-in-law even after they won out.
Sunni troops, an event which the Shiites rift was cemented when Ali's son was later killed by the ruling Sunni troops, an event which the Shiites commemorate every year.
So Iraq is I'm seeing the percentage, y'all. That's what I'm looking at.
Sunni troops, an event which the Shiites...
So Iraq is 50-50 Shiites and Sunni. And I know they got some Christians inside of Iraq too, so but we know that it's mostly Muslim, you know. So the majority of Iraq is Shiite.
Shiites commemorate every year.
Lebanon is Shiite. Iran 90% Shiite. Oh boy.
Fast forward more than 1,000 years, and the situation is worse than ever. According to a poll by Pew Research, some 40% of Sunnis don't even regard Shiites as real Muslims. But there's more than theology at work here. Perhaps even more important is geography. 100 years ago, around the time of the First World War, the Middle East was carved up in a Franco-British pact called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. But the Europeans had little interest in understanding the religious and ethnic intricacies of the Middle East when they divided up the region. Still, these arbitrary borders became the blueprint for today's map. The Shiites were divided primarily among Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon, with an offshoot of Shia Islam, the Alawites, in Syria. This area has come to be known as the Shia Crescent.
Wow.
Sunni Muslims make up the bulk of the population of other countries in the region, with pockets of Shiites scattered among them.
Oh, this makes so much more sense. Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's interesting. Look at that. Don't that make sense, y'all? And in the Muslim symbol, they actually have it where the Shiites have it as Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. You know what I mean? That's why Syria got so much conflict in there, because even though it's not majority Shiites, it's a heavy population of Muslim fighting for that to keep his Shia traditions and stuff like that. And then you got Saudi Arabia, a pretty much powerful place. You know, they kind of the powerful Sunnis that's been trying to smack the Shias for as long as possible since pretty much the birth of the conflict. And they're the one, like, I'm not saying Saudi Arabia is, but they're the ones, the Sunnis are responsible for killing the son-in-law or son of Ali, you know what I mean, or Muhammad, you know what I mean. So that's interesting. Okay. Wow. Okay, let's keep it going.
As you might expect, problems arise in countries where both sects are vying for power or one group feels oppressed. In Syria, for example, a Sunni majority has been ruled for the last 45 years by an Alawite minority. In Iraq, a Sunni minority ruled over the Shiite majority for decades.
Wow.
After the U.S. invasion, Saddam Hussein, a Sunni, was overthrown and a Shiite government took over.
Wow.
That government proceeded to marginalize the Sunnis, and now some of those disenfranchised Sunnis have gone on to form the so-called...
Yeah, that's where ISIS and all that come from. Oh. You see this, y'all? Whew. America, man. We do some damage, man. Holy shit. I'm gonna try to summarize this for you, because I'm pretty sure you guys are having common sense and you're kind of looking at this is understanding a lot of this stuff. You know what I mean? But if you look at that, us always wanting to overthrow the Syrian government, you know what I mean? And it was given, obviously the minority is the Shiites, but even through the history of the minority of Shiites, they're pretty aggressive and they're pretty radical. You know what I mean? Because if you look at it, they're the radical people that are fighting against a lot of the authoritarian of the Sunnis. That's what they're looking at it as. Like they're fighting against the oppression of the Sunnis. I mean, of the oppression that the Sunnis are putting upon them. The dominance that the Sunni Muslim culture, or pretty much the Sunnis, are putting against the Shiites. So the Shiites are like these rebels. You know what I mean? They're like the freedom fighters, okay? You know, something like that. I can't say freedom fighters, but you know, they're kind of the opposition, the minority that's been oppressed and stuff like that. So that they form these radical groups like ISIS, and I wonder if Al Qaeda and all the stuff like that is. I wonder what the demographics is. I gotta look that up. What Afghanistan is and the Taliban and all that stuff like that. But it's interesting. So now you see when they overthrew the president of of Syria, that's a Sunni, and it kind of gave way to, now that he's gone, it's a radical country. It's been like always radical since he's been in a major conflict with America. And then like Iraq is radical since we overthrown Saddam Hussein. You get what I'm saying? And so on and so on and so on. If you look at it, every time we come in to overthrow the Sunni government, you know what I mean, we get, it's a wild situation that's popping off, you know? So that means that Saudi Arabia didn't like us overthrowing Syria. That's had to be. And they probably didn't like that we overthrew Saddam Hussein. And now that we got such a good collaboration with Trump and the Saudi king and stuff like that, they got a good relationship. That's just, it's wild. So that's interesting, man. Very interesting. Information, y'all. Don't be ignorant. This is to understand what's going on.
Countries in the region, with pockets of Shiites scattered among them. As you might expect, problems arise in countries where both sects are vying for power or one group feels oppressed. In Syria, for example, a Sunni majority has been ruled for the last 45 years by an Alawite minority. In Iraq, a Sunni minority ruled over the Shiite majority for decades. After the U.S. invasion, Saddam Hussein, a Sunni, was overthrown and a Shiite government took over. That government proceeded to marginalize the Sunnis.
So this is a problem, because a lot of the stuff that's been going on in the last, and I'm not saying it's a problem, you know, it's probably for the best. The people got a better voice or something, or the minority got a better voice or something, but we gave birth to this stuff. You get what I'm saying? So we kind of went in and fought for the oppressed part of, or what we felt like was the minority of the government, and now we have given that. And it's just like almost like the inner cities and stuff, and in America, black people, we always felt oppressed, and our people felt oppressed and marginalized, and you know, through the Jim Crow laws and stuff like that. That the riots and the protests and all the civil rights movement and stuff. So the white population gave the city to black people. Say, hey, guys, look, you want to manage this stuff? You want to run cities? You want to you want to kind of understand how the real world is, and you want to have your hands in it. You want to have control of the economics of the city, of industry and all that stuff like that. Hey, here, take it. We go up north. We're going to the suburbs. We go into the rural areas. We're going to build lands and build malls and build like our own little cities out there. You guys can have the metropolitan. You can have the successful industry of America here. So that's why black people was given New York. They was given like Detroit. They was given like Atlanta. They was given like all the major powerful situations, you know. So now, fast forward to now, those are the most disenfranchised environments. You get what I'm saying? That's where the most poverty and the most economically unsensible interactions are going in, because they gave power to the minorities, the Black Americans, and we either kind of like being oppressed by Black leadership that's over us. So Black people are getting oppressed and getting robbed and getting like marginalized by Black leaders that tells us all the good stuff and all talk the propaganda of racism and all that stuff to us. But policy and economic understanding of capitalism and understanding how to make the city work for the Black people and the people of the city is not favorable to Black people. We're giving millions and millions to foreigners and everything like that from the cities. If you watch how a lot of the people that Black people put into office, they literally do very good foresight and proactive like decisions for foreigners, from people that are coming here from immigration, illegal immigration policies and stuff. They use really good business tactics, like, you know what, let's set you up with a food cart, let's set you up with a restaurant, let's put you in your first house, set you up for 2 years to get yourself on your feet. And all this upward mobility ideology and strategies and stuff, they don't get put into the Black population of the cities. It actually gets used for newcomers. So so I put that in reference to that the power was given to the minority that yearn for it and want it, and they kind of always say, we never had the power. So when they get the power, they do the most radical stuff with the power and create a high instability and unstable environment because of just the anger and the ruling of the majority. They they let it go to their head so much where they not even stabilizing, handling the power, handling the decision making, handling the actual like the making of the world. So the inner cities and the metropolitan areas, you have Black people that got power, decision making, even in voting and elections and all that stuff. The Black vote is so powerful, but what they do with that power is they put themselves in the worst circumstances ever. They pick horribly. They make terrible decisions that don't make their lives or the societal situation better. And it's just it's almost like a ruling of anger. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting. I hope you guys understand what I say. You're gonna be able to watch it back and to kind of get. But that's what's going on. The Shiites they ruling with a heavy hand because they felt they've been oppressed for so long by the Sunnis that they got to get revenge. And that's how Black people are. They ruling with a heavier hand because they feel like they got to get revenge on the white people. But what they doing is they hurt themselves because the white people like, hey, we ain't even around y'all like that. We come into your city for a ball game and we go right back home. Yeah, y'all can have it.
After the U.S. invasion, Saddam Hussein, a Sunni, was overthrown and a Shiite government took over. That government proceeded to marginalize the Sunnis, and now some of those disenfranchised Sunnis have gone on to form the so-called Islamic State, or ISIS. Now let's do a quick who's who in the Middle East. As you've just heard, ISIS, along with Al-Qaeda, are Sunni groups.
Wow.
Hezbollah is Shiite. Osama bin Laden was a Sunni. Syrian President
Wow.
Bashar al-Assad is an Alawite. Remember, that's a Shiite sect. And the Iranian...
So the Sunnis are so ISIS is a Sunni? I thought they was like marginalized Shiites in Iraq. Well, I'll take that back. That's interesting. Wow, so Saudi Arabia got the crazy people. So the rich people, the wealthy people, the most successful people got the wild stuff. This is wow. Let me look at this again. That's wow.
State, or ISIS. Now let's do a quick who's who in the Middle East. As you've just heard, ISIS, along with Al-Qaeda, are Sunni groups. Hezbollah is Shiite. Osama bin Laden was a Sunni. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is an Alawite. Remember, that's a Shiite sect. And the Iranian mullahs are Shiites as well, which helps explain why Iran has gotten involved in the conflict in Syria. And where does America stand in all this? Traditionally, the U.S.'s strongest allies in the region have been Sunni powers, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan. But now the U.S. is pursuing a nuclear deal with Shiite Iran and is working alongside Shiites in Iraq to try to destroy ISIS. But at the same time, Washington still supports Saudi Arabia, which is currently bombing Iranian-backed Shiite rebels in Yemen. Confused yet? One satirist summarized the tangled web of conflicting relations.
Oh wow, this is interesting. And this documentary, you gotta go back to before the propaganda started, y'all, to go grab this stuff. And they might, and because of my podcast, they might kind of, I really should be downloading all my episodes and stuff, but they might scrub a lot of this, but it's still out there. It's still on YouTube too. The truth is on YouTube. You just got to find it. You got to kind of allow yourself to be objective to know when to go grab certain things and what's the titling of stuff to kind of do it. But look at the tangling web of that's how messy it is, y'all. That's how messy it is. You get what I'm saying?
With this map.
So what can we conclude? At the end of the day, it's important to remember that the majority of ordinary Sunnis and Shiites do not hate each other, and both groups share the same core tenets of Islam. In a sense, it's similar to the differences between, say, the Catholics and the Protestants, and the fighting and the bloodshed that we're seeing across the region are less about religion than they are about power.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Look, y'all, I'm just trying to give you guys knowledge on this stuff, so we can have a little bit better understanding. And I got a little bit, I think I got a whole lot more better understanding as I kind of look at a lot of that stuff. Okay, so now we're going into the Jewish culture, you know what I mean? And just to understand, because they banned you from saying Zionist and Zionism and stuff, but they refer to like Israel and people supporters of Israel, they refer to themselves as Zionists. You know what I mean? So I just don't understand it in the context of it, but I do want to kind of give you guys some kind of knowledge on it. So let's go to that next, okay?
What exactly is Zionism? Where did the idea of Jewish return to the land of Israel, which came to be an integral part of Zionism, originate? And what did this return mean to different groups at different times? Was and is there more than one kind of Zionism? For starters, we have to know that Zionism didn't begin with Theodor Herzl. The roots of the Zionist idea grow deep in the land of Israel. The Jewish people's connection to the land has been at the center of their story for at least 3,000 years. For about 1,000 years, the Jewish people built a rich and thriving ancient civilization in the land. This lasted until the year 70 CE, when the Romans destroyed the Jewish temple in Jerusalem and exiled the Jews from their land. For the 2,000 years since then, Jews scattered across the globe have been carrying a collective connection to the land of Israel and a hope to return to it. But let's go back to the beginning. According to the biblical record, the Jewish patriarchs and matriarchs made their home in the land of Israel. Their descendants, freed from Egyptian slavery, returned to the land several hundred years later. Centuries of civil war among the Israelite tribes was followed by the United Kingdom of David, and later Solomon, which centralized Jewish worship in Jerusalem with the establishment of the first temple. Of course,
folks are dying.
Sorry about the commercials.
Accuracy of many biblical stories. Jerusalem with the establishment of the first temple. Of course, there are debates over the historical accuracy of many biblical stories, but what's grounded in historical fact is that the Jewish people living in Israel centuries before their exile told these foundational stories. Perhaps more importantly, these stories have been essential to Jewish identity for millennia. But back to history. After some 4 centuries of religious and national development under Jewish rule, the land was invaded by the Babylonians. The Jerusalem temple was destroyed and many Jews were exiled to Babylon. This was a period of great devastation for the ancient Jewish civilization. It was only after the Babylonian Empire fell to Persia, roughly 50 years later, that those exiled were eventually able to return in a remarkable and historic homecoming. Referred to as Shivat Zion, or the Return to Zion, this movement was initiated by the visionary leaders Ezra and Nehemiah. The Jewish community was revitalized and the temple was rebuilt. In many ways, this shorter period of exile and return can be seen as a precursor to the ideals and ambitions of Jewish self-determination that is now known as Zionism. Jewish civilization in ancient Israel then continued for another 400 years until the Romans destroyed the Second Temple and exiled the Jewish people yet again in the 1st and 2nd centuries. This time, though, the exile would last 2,000 years. Of course, this is a fairly simplistic, condensed summary of a much more extensive ancient history. But what it all means is that for 1,000 years, the land of Israel was the center of Jewish political and cultural life and day-to-day society. So there's an ancient connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. But if the land is so important, then how were Jews able to remain Jews for almost 2,000 years without living there? Well, despite their distance from it, the land has always remained the geographic center of the Jewish faith and religious practice. The annual cycle of the biblical Jewish festivals are based on the agricultural cycles and seasons in the land of Israel. The Maccabean revolt commemorated by Hanukkah also occurred in the land. The biblical and post-biblical stories still studied today were rooted in the land. The rabbis that taught and developed the very foundation of Jewish practice resided in Israel. Their teachings were compiled in the 63-volume legal anthology known as the Mishnah, the basis of Jewish religious law even today, also written in Israel. Even the longing for their return to the land developed into a foundational piece of Jewish religious, cultural, and national identity. The Jewish liturgy includes prayers 3 times a day for a collective return to and rebuilding of the land.
You see why Israel is so important to Jewish people, because even if they kind of, they went through so many wars and been dethroned from the actual land and all the other stuff. And I'm going by what he's saying. Okay. We're not talking about what's right, wrong, or right now. We're talking about how the people of Israel and Jewish people, how they communicate what their beliefs is. That I did that to how the Muslims communicate how their beliefs is and stuff. So, but if we're gonna go by what they say, and that's what's facts to them, is like, that's why the land is so important to them and everything, and what they fight for, and it's almost like a even just through the Holocaust and everything, it's like a never let this happen again. Never be submissive to the power, and now it's aggressive to never allow themselves to be passive. Even if there's a small footprint of Earth, they're very, very powerful. They're the most powerful people on Earth. You get what I'm saying? So that's just a very interesting thing, just to kind of get these little nuggets and everything. And so I'm gonna let him finish up because he's flowing, he's cooking.
Religious study includes ancient rites and rituals that would only apply once the Jews were to return and rebuild the temple. At the close of the Passover Seder, Jews call out "next year in Jerusalem," And each summer, on Tisha B'Av, the Jewish people mourn the destruction of the temple and their exile from the land. At Jewish weddings, the couple breaks a glass in commemoration of Jerusalem's destruction and the hope that they return to it. From country to country, throughout the diaspora, Jews maintained a deep faith that they would one day be returned to their homeland. Some Jews even made efforts to actualize that dreaming by immigrating to Israel, known as making Aliyah. The long and dangerous journey was difficult and often life-threatening. Many who set out on Aliyah didn't make it. The 13th century Spanish rabbi Nachmanides was one of the first medieval rabbis who traveled to Jerusalem, hoping to renew Jewish life there. He found the city in desolation as a result of the Crusades, yet he succeeded in reestablishing a lasting Jewish communal life there and established a synagogue that is still in use today. After the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492, a large number of Jews immigrated to the land. Among them were the families of future rabbis who would become pivotal in the development of Judaism. These included Rabbi Isaac Luria and Rabbi Joseph Caro, both of whom became the leaders of the mystical Kabbalistic movement that emerged in the city of Tzfat in northern Israel. The influx of Jews from Spain and North Africa led to a golden age of Tzfat, during which the city was a global center for Jewish learning and trade through the 15th and 16th centuries. In the late 18th century, some followers of the Hasidic movement also began to make Aliyah to the land of Israel. One of the earliest Hasidic masters, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, settled in Tzfat with 300 of his followers in 1777, the first of several Hasidic settlements. During roughly the same period, the Vilna Gaon, who many considered the greatest Jewish scholar in centuries, wrote that the long-awaited redemption would only come once the Jews took practical action on their own and settled the land of Israel. They could not rely on prayer and meditation alone while waiting for a messianic age. So in the early 19th...
Yeah, but just go, you guys got to look and see. It's kind of, even just how they articulate and how they even like mobilize themselves and how they function and what they do is based on stuff that's like, he's talking about 1492. That's when Christopher Columbus, came over to seek out America and all that stuff. So this is very important, and it shows you through hundreds and thousands of years this mindset of Israel as our home is held heavily. You know what I mean?
Century, more than 500 disciples of the Vilna Gaon made the difficult and dangerous journey to Israel, settling in Jerusalem, where they revived ancient rituals and customs and established schools. Later, in the mid-19th century, Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai and later Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer also stressed that redemption would only come as a result of practical steps. They called for resettling of the land as a method of Jewish self-help and shared many ideas that would later be applied by the Zionist movement. Okay, so there were plenty of small migrations and movements to return to Israel. But how did these give way to the organized mass movement of Jews from around the world returning to the land that we know today as Zionism? Well, a large part of what fueled such organization was the idea of Jewish emancipation that emerged from the Enlightenment in the 18th century, combined with the new 19th century concept of nation-states. Added to the mix was the intensifying persecution of Jews in Europe. In 1882, a pamphlet called Auto-Emancipation, Warning to His Kinsman from a Russian Jew, was published by a physician named Leon Pinsker.
I have a 134 IQ.
Boy, I'll tell you these commercials.
Warning to His Kinsman from a Russian Jew was published by a physician combined with the new 19th century concept of nation-states. Added to the mix was the intensifying persecution of Jews in Europe. In 1882, a pamphlet called Auto-Emancipation, Warning to His Kinsman from a Russian Jew was published by a physician named Leon Pinsker. Pinsker came to the novel conclusion that hatred of Jews, what he termed Judeophobia, wouldn't be overcome by a change in Jews' political status in their host countries or even by equal rights. Instead, he argued for a new approach, the establishment of a sovereign political Jewish state. He then founded an organization called Chovevei Zion, or Lovers of Zion, which began to facilitate the emigration of Jews to the land of Israel. This was the birth of a practical or political Zionism that aimed towards the eventual creation of an independent nation state for Jews. And when Rabbi Samuel Mohilever and his disciple Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Reines became leaders of Chovevei Zion and its religious offshoot, the Mizrahi movement, it marked the beginning of religious Zionism as a movement and its early partnership with political Zionism. But these weren't the only Zionist ideas in development. Another Zionist movement began to emerge in 1888 with the circulation of an essay called Lo Zu Haderech, or This Is Not the Way. It laid out a harsh critique of practical Zionism and was written by Ahad Ha'am, the founder of what would come to be known as cultural Zionism. Ahad Ha'am had been influenced by Pinsker's pamphlet and ideas and was a member of Chovevei Zion. But he was critical of the feasibility of practical Zionism and the massive immigration that it envisioned, let alone the large-scale establishment of a nation-state. Instead, Ahad Ha'am proposed the gradual establishment of a Jewish cultural renaissance that would unite Jews across the world with its spiritual center in Israel. Two of its central goals would be a revival of Hebrew language and Jewish literacy. But there were yet other strands of Zionism developing during the same period. Socialist and labor Zionist movements, inspired by Marxist ideals, aimed to work.
And I just want you guys to catch up and understand that the phrasing of Zionism and Zionists are used by Jewish people. You get what I'm saying? So our ignorance as Americans and us trying to be political advocates and anti-ism and stuff like that, we made it where the word Zionist and Zionism are profane or what they would call slurs, and actually that's not true. It's terminologies that Jewish people use, and it's for a certain, as people that are favored to the land of Israel, and they kind of are compassionate and they are loyal to the land of Israel. They are what's called a Zionist, and in the ideology that actually makes them be heartfelt and loyal to Israel is Zionism. So once you understand that, the propaganda of how we communicating, you just kind of start seeing, okay, let's put everything back in context. So in order for us to even go to Iran, I need you guys to understand what all this noise is, and we're coming in with our cheeseburger, Escalades, yachts, and mansions, and porn. That's America. You know what I mean? And we coming into this heritage and this cultural conflict between Muslim Shiites and Shiites and Jewish Zionism and Zionists. And it's out of our league. And also we're too much of mutts and Neanderthals, or even uncivilized and uncouth type of culture that's in America, and we're trying to take a side to something that it's not even us, it's not even our culture, it's not even how we move and who we are. You get what I'm saying? So that's my point of even kind of taking you guys through this, so you can understand how much we're removed from a lot of the stuff we put our nose in when we going into making decisions in Iraq, or making a decision in Afghanistan, making a decision in Syria, making a decision in different cultures, and even in Israel and stuff like that, and Iran. When we put our nose and we kind of put our hands in this stuff, is this us? Does this really make or break us, that we win the point of view in these cultures, in these countries, in this ideology? Is it what point does it make for us to win those arguments? You know what I mean? And that's the problem when we put our nose in Shiites versus Sunnis, and Sunnis versus Shiites, and we put our nose in Israel and Jewish people, and Zionism versus Shiites and Sunni and stuff like that. And now look what we're doing. That's what birthed it and actually gave room for the war that we're doing in Iran, and we're losing American soldiers' lives for it. You know what I mean? So, but we'll get there.
The land in order to create a socialist communal model of society. In time, these efforts would eventually lead to the early kibbutz movement. But then how did all of these different movements eventually come together? Well, this is where a Jewish Austrian journalist named Theodor Herzl finally comes in. Just 5 years after Pinsker's death, Herzl published his book, Der Judenstaat, or The Jewish State, in 1896. This changed everything. Not necessarily because Herzl's ideas were so new, in fact, they were very similar to Pinsker's, but mainly because the timing was so perfect. There had been so many Zionist developments that the stage was now set for Herzl's vision. And so, when Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress, Pinsker's Hope of Etzion was
That was in 1897. That's how far this stuff comes. It's got stability to it. It's got stable ideology to it. And, like, you really want to get in the middle of this stuff?
absorbed into Herzl's new Zionist organization. But disagreements remained. Ahad Ha'am, as before, opposed what he now referred to as Westernized Zionism. He saw Herzl's Zionism as devoid of Judaism and as an abandonment of Hebrew language and Jewish culture in preference of a purely Westernized state.
What if you could clean your...
So tired of these commercials. Sorry about the commercials.
He considered Herzl's vision of mass immigration and a nation state to be wishful thinking. He also objected to the Zionist movement's general dismissal of the Arab population already living in the land. Herzl died in 1904, and so he didn't witness the most significant development towards his vision, which came 13 years later when the Balfour Declaration was issued in 1917. This was a statement by the British government that supported the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It was a hard-won...
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to go back to that where he said,
He also objected to the Zionist movement's general dismissal of the Arab population nation state to be wishful thinking. He also objected to the Zionist movement's general dismissal of the Arab population already living in the land. Herzl died in 1904, and so he didn't witness the most significant development towards his vision, which came 13 years later when the Balfour Declaration was issued in 1917. This was a statement by the British government that supported the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It was a hard-won result of more than a decade of effort by Zionist leader Dr. Chaim Weizmann. Weizmann's mentor, none other than Ahad Ha'am, advised him during the Balfour negotiations. Ultimately, Ahad Ha'am's cultural Zionism merged with Herzl's political Zionism once it was clear that not only was a Jewish state feasible, but that a large immigrant population and Jewish culture were already flourishing in the land. So, do we think there's just one idea that defines Zionism? Or that Zionism is the same for everyone? Whatever one's flavor of Zionism, be it political, religious, cultural, social, or other, the unique advancements for the Jewish people that have come with the State of Israel demonstrate how self-determination fulfills not merely a single expression of Zionism, but a Zionism that can cover the entire spectrum of Jewish life. Zionism is not just about the successful return to Jewish sovereignty that was central to political Zionism, or the spirituality and national redemption that was a concern of religious Zionism, or the establishment of a socialist community dedicated to radical equality that was an ideal of social Zionism, or even the revitalization of an ancient language, literacy, and culture that was the ambition of cultural Zionism. Zionism is all of these things, and much more. It is an acknowledgement of the unique role of the State of Israel in establishing a thriving, modern Jewish civilization as the embodiment of the Jewish people's connection to their ancient homeland that is rooted in history and dedicated to the future. Thanks for watching. See you guys next week.
Okay. I want to go back to when they said that they wrote up a declaration because obviously Kingdom of England, they were kind of, the queen and then was kind of making policies and everything, taking over colonialized and stuff and everything. But I want to go back to when they decided to, because he even called the land Palestinian land. So I want to go back to that. That's interesting.
Herzl died in 1904, and so he didn't witness the most significant development towards his vision, which came 13 nation state to be wishful thinking. He also objected to the Zionist movement's general dismissal of the Arab population already living in the land. Herzl died in 1904, and so he didn't witness the most significant development towards his vision, which came 13 years later when the Balfour Declaration was issued in 1917.
The Balfour, that's what I gotta look up too.
Herzl died in 1904, and so he didn't witness the most significant development towards his vision, which came 13 years later when the Balfour Declaration was issued in 1917. This was a statement by the British government.
1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on the behalf of His Majesty government, the Henry VIII or something, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspiration. See, even when he's writing this letter to Lord Rothschild, he's kind of calling it Jewish Zionist aspirations. So that's the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspiration. I want to read that better. I'm sorry, guys. I got to get myself together. I should have made some coffee. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure to conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspiration, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine. See, in Palestine, they said they have decided in Palestine of a nation home for the Jewish people, meaning that they decided parts of Palestine will be Jewish home. Now, they may be wrong because it was Jewish land and they just got kicked out of there through time and everything like that. But at the time of this, who owns the land and who can give land to people and stuff, and like in the majesty of pretty much the world, royalty in London and all that good stuff, they said His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this objection, meaning that we're going to make this the land of the Jewish people, whatever parts of Palestine that they're doing, that they're giving to the Jewish people. Not saying that it's not Jewish land. Don't get me wrong on that. I'm just saying this is what the document, and even Jewish people, because you got to remember the gentleman that's doing this, this actual unpack, he's communicating this history of Jewish and Zionism and Zionist movement and stuff like that, and the loyalty of Jewish people to the land of Israel. He's saying this. He decided to put this letter on this presentation. So I have to be logical and not go outside of what the facts is from what he's showing. And he even been objective, and he's saying that the Majesty gave the land to the Jewish people from the Palestinian land. Okay, that's what he's saying. His Majesty government view with favor the establishment in Palestine, okay, of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It's been clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice in civil and religious rights of existing none. Okay, I like that. See that? They're telling them don't be racist to the people that are on the land. Okay, that's interesting. It's been clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring the declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Just forget my reading. But they also kind of knowing that Palestine has got Muslims and different races and different civilizations and religions that run around in Palestine, but certain parts of Palestine, they decided that they were going to make it Jewish land. You get what I'm saying? But that's a major conflict. This declaration did a lot of damage and killings because it's it's a major conflict there. It's been there forever, and it's that decoration, something else, man.
That supported the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It was a hard-won result of more than a decade of effort by Zionist leader Dr. Chaim Weizmann. Weizmann's mentor, none other than Ahad Ha'am, advised him.
And so Jewish people validates that land and the rightfulness of that land from the Declaration of the Majesty, the royalty giving that land to them in Palestine. But they gave terminology that is Palestine, and the people that was already on that land were non-Jewish people. So that's interesting. Now, I'm not taking a side. I'm giving you guys objective analysis of this stuff.
Balfour negotiations. Ultimately, Ahad Ha'am's cultural Zionism merged with Herzl's political Zionism once it was clear that not only was a Jewish state feasible, but that a large immigrant population and Jewish culture were already flourishing in the land. So, do we think there's just one idea that defines Zionism? Or that Zionism is the same for everyone? Whatever one's flavor of Zionism, be it political, religious, cultural, social, or other, the unique advancements for the Jewish people that have come with the State of Israel demonstrate how self-determination fulfills not merely a single expression of Zionism, but a Zionism that can cover the entire spectrum of Jewish life. Zionism is not just about the successful return to Jewish sovereignty that was central to political Zionism, or the spirituality and national redemption that was a concern of religious Zionism, or the establishment of a socialist community dedicated to radical equality that was an ideal of social Zionism, or even the revitalization of an ancient language, literacy, and culture that was the ambition of cultural Zionism. Zionism is all of these things, and much more. It is an acknowledgement of the unique role of the State of Israel in establishing a thriving modern Jewish civilization as the embodiment of the Jewish people's connection to their ancient homeland that is rooted in history and dedicated to the future. Thanks for watching. See you guys next week.
Okay, so, and then now I'm just going to kind of give you guys a little peek into the terminology of Zionism and Zionists, because the reason why I want to nail this so much is because it was communicated as a slur. And I want you guys to see that Jewish people refer to themselves as Zionism and Zionist movements, okay?
Visit, he met with Prime Minister Benjamin. During Joe Biden's Israel visit, he met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and stated, "I don't believe you have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. I'm a Zionist." Historically,
that was Biden's. I know he's a warped guy, but that's how he communicated Zionists, and that's how people that like this is. I just need you guys to understand. Stop flagging people, YouTube. Stop canceling people. Stop demonetizing people because they're using the phrasing of Zionism and Zionists. If they're using it in the right context that Jewish people use it, then it's rightful for them to say it.
I don't believe you have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. I'm a Zionist. Historically, Zionism wasn't always widely accepted among Jews. Originating in the 19th century, it met resistance from many within the Jewish community.
And he's got a sign that says Zionists and Jews are opposites. Zionists and Jews are opposites. Respect the Jews, oppose the Zionists. Wow. Must be a liberal. I like it. It's interesting.
This movement anchored in the belief that it met resistance from many within the Jewish community. This movement anchored in the belief that Jews as a nationality and religion deserve their ancestral homeland Israel, has critics who highlight concerns over Israel's expansion and occupation of Palestine. Tracing Jewish nationhood to around 950 BC with King David, modern Zionism found its footing in the late 19th century alongside rising European nationalism. Theodor Herzl, an Austrian Jewish journalist who witnessed European anti-Semitism, galvanized this sentiment into an international movement around 1896. He championed the idea that Jews needed their own nation for survival, inspiring significant Jewish migration to Israel/Palestine. However, Zionists differ in their vision for Israel's governance. The Zionists left dominant until the 1970s, supports land for peace deals, government economic intervention, and secular governance. The Zionist right, now more prominent, is generally skeptical of land for peace deals, leans libertarian economically, and intertwines religion with politics. Many Arabs and Palestinians see Zionism as a form of colonialism, granting privileges to Jews not extended to others. A UN resolution in 1975 labeled Zionism as racism, though it was repealed 16 years later.
Interesting. Yeah, see? All kind of stuff in here, man. So I'm gonna go to this last clip, and this Israel and Palestine conflict.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about Israel and Palestine, hopefully without a flame war. Yeah, big ask, Mr. Green. I mean, that fight goes back thousands and thousands of years. Except thousands of years ago, there wasn't an Islam yet, so yeah, no. Also, let me submit that very little of this conflict between Israel and Palestine over the last several decades has been about, theological differences between Islam and Judaism. No one's arguing about whether the most important prophets descended from Abraham's son Isaac or his son Ishmael, right? It's not about whether to fast during Yom Kippur or Ramadan. It's about land. Portraying the conflict as eternal or as religious makes it feel intractable in a way that, frankly, it isn't. So instead, let's begin, as most historians do, in the late 19th century. And instead of talking about religion, let's follow the lead of historians like James Gelvin and discuss competing nationalisms. Okay, so in the late 19th century, the Ottoman Empire ruled over what we now know as Palestine. The population there, according to Ottoman records from 1878, was 87% Muslim, 10% Christian, and 3% Jewish. Everybody spoke Arabic as the daily language, and in Jerusalem, the religious populations were roughly equal. To give you a sense of life in Ottoman Palestine, an Arab Orthodox Christian musician named Wasif Jaharia grew up in Jerusalem in the first decade of the 20th century, learning the Quran in school and celebrating both Passover and Eid with his Jewish and Muslim neighbors. Ottoman Palestine was, in short, a place in which people of different religious faiths lived peacefully together. All right, let's go to the thought bubble. The late 19th century was the golden age of nationalism in Europe, and no place was crazier than the Habsburg Austro-Hungarian Empire, in which at least 10 different nations all wanted their own state. And in that hyper-nationalistic empire lived a Jewish journalist named Theodor Herzl, who had hoped that Jews could assimilate into European nations, but soon became convinced that the Jewish people needed to leave Europe and settle in their own state. The concept of Jewish nationalism came to be known as Zionism. It's important to keep in mind that most Zionists were secular Jews, so they imagined Israel as a state for Jews more than a Jewish state. In 1917, the British government, hoping to gain the support of Jewish people, issued the Balfour Declaration, promising, quote, the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. A bold promise, considering that Palestine was still technically Ottoman, as they hadn't yet lost World War I. Of course, they would.
And that's the letter that the Majesty kind of gave to the Jewish heads and stuff. It's interesting. I'm gonna play it a little bit more. I don't want to watch the whole thing, but I do want to see what's going on here, because they're kind of linking the war and the conflict of Israel versus Palestine. So I just want to kind of show you guys the make of that before we go into the coverage of before we go into the coverage of Iran.
Soon, but it turned out that the British were over-promisers when it came to Palestine, because a year before the Balfour Declaration, the British had secretly promised the French that they would divide up the Arab territories and the Brits would keep Palestine. Furthermore, in 1915, other British officials had promised the ruler of Mecca, Sharif Hussein, that he would rule over an Arab state in...
See, it shows you how ridiculous the Europeans were, and the British government was, and the British kingdom was, and all that stuff, where they made a promise to the Jewish people to give the land to them, or whatever divide that they were doing of Palestinian land, but also is disrespecting the people that's pretty much living on the land and stuff like that, and making a big conflict with the Arabic community and stuff. And it's just arrogance and messiness.
British were overpromisers when it came to Palestine because a year before the Balfour Declaration, the British had secretly promised the French that they would divide up the Arab territories and the Brits would keep Palestine. Furthermore, in 1915, other British officials had promised the ruler of Mecca, Sharif Hussein, that he would rule over an Arab state, including Palestine, if he led an Arab revolt against Ottoman rule, which Hussein promptly did. So basically, the Brits had promised Palestine to the Meccans, to themselves, and to the Zionists. What could go wrong? Thanks, Thought Bubble. So shortly after the end of the war, the British established a colony in Palestine with the idea that they'd rule until the Palestinians were ready to govern themselves. At which point the people living in Palestine were like, well, now seems good. And the British were like, yeah, but maybe not just yet. Meanwhile, the British established separate institutions for Christians, Jews, and Muslims, making it difficult for Palestinian Christians and Muslims to cooperate and easier for the British to, quote, divide and rule the inhabitants of Palestine.
Wow.
Again, what could go wrong? Meanwhile, the British did attempt to honor the Balfour Declaration's promise to, quote, facilitate Jewish immigration under suitable conditions. Between 1920 and 1939, the Jewish population of Palestine increased by over 320,000 people. In fact, by 1938, Jews were just under 30% of the population of Palestine. And the growing Jewish population focused on purchasing land from absentee non-Palestinian Arab landowners and then evicting Palestinian farmers who were living and working there. By controlling both the land and the labor, they hoped to establish a more secure community within Palestine. But of course, these practices heightened tensions between Jewish people and Arab Palestinians during the 1920s and 1930s.
Absolutely.
Along the way, Palestinian
So crazy.
Arabs began to think of themselves as the Palestinian nation, and that growing sense of nationalism erupted in 1936 when the Palestinians revolted against the British. With the help of Jewish militias, the British brutally suppressed the Palestinian revolt, but in the aftermath, the British issued a white paper limiting Jewish immigration to Palestine and calling for the establishment of a joint Arab and Jewish state in Palestine within 10 years. This managed to leave no one happy. The Zionists were...
Yeah, that's wow, dude. And look, he's giving you facts and stuff, yeah.
Britain for limiting Jewish immigration at a time when Jews particularly needed to leave Europe, and the Arab Palestinians were unhappy about the prospect of waiting 10 years for a state. And then came World War II, which was actually quite a peaceful time in Palestine. But then it ended and tensions resumed, and the British realized that colonies like Palestine were far more trouble than they were worth, so they handed the issue of Palestine over to the newly created United Nations. They were like, oh, hey there, United Nations, for your first problem. So in November of 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine into separate Palestinian and Jewish states. The partition plan called for 2 states roughly equal in size, but the borders looked like a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, you do not look at this map and think, yeah, that's gonna work. Sure enough, it didn't. And soon after the plan was announced, the cleverly named 1948 Arab-Israeli War broke out, with Israel on the one side and the Palestinians and many Arab states on the other. The Israelis won, and when an armistice was signed in 1949, Israel occupied a third more land than they would have had under the UN proposal. Meanwhile, Jordan controlled and later annexed the West Bank and the old city of Jerusalem, and Egypt controlled the Gaza Strip. Over 700,000 Palestinians fled their homes and became refugees in the surrounding Arab countries. And to Israelis, this war was the beginning of their nation. To the Palestinians, it was the Nabka, the catastrophe, as they became stateless. Over the next 18 years, nothing changed territorially, and then in 1967, Israel and several Arab states went to war again. It was called the 6 Days War because, get this, it lasted 6 days. Israel won and then gained control over the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. So the 1947 proposal looked like this. By 1967, things looked like this. Then the UN passed Resolution 242. Man, they are good at naming resolutions, which outlined a basic framework for achieving peace, including Israel
UN is a mess.
withdrawing from the territory acquired in the war, and all participants recognizing the rights of both a Palestinian and an Israeli state to exist. This, of course, did not happen. After the war, the broader Israeli-Arab conflict morphed into a more specific Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And this is a nice moment to note that not all Muslims are Arabs, not all Arabs are Palestinians, and not all Palestinians are Muslims. Like, there's a significant Christian minority of Palestinians, for instance. Palestinian is a word used to describe the ethnic identity of those who have historically lived in Palestine. There were, for instance, lots of Christians in the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, formed in 1964 and led by Yasser Arafat. The PLO oversaw guerrilla groups that attacked civilians, but also used non-violent approaches to try to achieve a Palestinian state. And meanwhile, the Israeli government
also uses non-violence, but they use violence. It's wild.
Government began to establish Jewish settlements in what had been Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. There are now over 350,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank and over 200,000 in East Jerusalem. And these settlements are illegal according to international law, but Israel counters by saying that they aren't really illegal because Palestine isn't really a state. By the late 1980s, Palestinians launched the first Intifada, which literally means shaking off. And this began with boycotts of Israeli products and services and refusing to pay Israeli taxes. But when the Israeli armed forces cracked down on protesters, violence ensued. And the first Intifada also saw the founding of Hamas, which launched the first suicide bombing against Israel in 1993. Hamas gained support partly because of its militancy, but mostly because of its social welfare projects in Gaza. It built and staffed schools, mosques, and clinics. The most important legacy of the first Intifada was the emergence of peace talks between Palestinians and Israelis. This led to the Oslo Accords and a peace process based on our old friend United Nations Security Council Resolution 242. But there were a lot of issues to resolve. I mean, putting aside the question of how to make two states that don't look like a jigsaw puzzle, there was the question of the Jewish settlement and the right for Palestinian refugees and their descendants to return to Palestine, water rights, which are a big deal in that part of the world.
And you see, now it's just the decision now is just hey, let's just not even try to make it a two-state. You guys can live here if you want, but it's all Jewish land now, This wild stuff, man. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I'm just telling you that only the strong survives and only the strong wins. And this is how everybody's life is. So if you feel like you're not rich enough because you plan too fair, you're being too passive.
And so on. It's very complicated. So then came the Clinton talk. So it's time for the open letter. But first, let's see what's inside of the globe. Oh, look, it's a collection of philandering American presidents. An open letter to Bill Clinton. Hey, Bill, so your talks probably came closer than any other time in recent history to...
Yeah, calling him a philanderer is very biased.
An actual peace deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak was willing to give up more land currently claimed by Israel than at any time in the past. Even Yasser Arafat was surprised. Although not all the questions got addressed, you were definitely closing in on something. But in the end, it didn't happen. And since then, not to criticize you, things have gotten kind of worse and worse and worse. Worst of all, that was your big legacy moment. Now all you've got is the conflict in Northern Ireland getting resolved while you were president. In short, it could have been amazing, but instead it was kind of meh. Kind of like your presidency, actually. At least you'll always have those vodka-soaked hugs with Boris Yeltsin to look back on. Best wishes, John Green. So the Clinton talks failed, Ehud Barak's government was undermined, and then in September of 2000, Prime Minister candidate Ariel Sharon led a group of 1,000 armed guards to the Temple Mount in the old city of Jerusalem. To Muslims, this is known as the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it's the third holiest site in Islam, behind only the Kaaba in Mecca and the Prophet's Mosque in Medina. And it's the holiest site in Judaism, so in short, it's a pretty touchy place to march to with 1,000 armed guards. So the event sparked a massive protest, which eventually led to the much more violent second Intifada, in which more than 3,000 Palestinians and 1,000 Israelis were eventually killed. In 2002, the Israelis, claiming to act in defense of civilians, began construction of a wall around the West Bank. But instead of following the borders established after the 1967 war, the barrier was built to include many Israeli settlements on the Israeli side. To Israelis, that was about self-defense. To Palestinians, it...
Yeah, that's messy. So you guys get it now? We don't need to go all the way up to today, but I guess if you want, okay, I'll do it. It's only about a minute and a half. Okay, I'll keep going.
It was an illegal land grab. Then in 2005, Yasser Arafat died, and in an election shortly thereafter, Hamas won a majority of the parliamentary seats. Since then, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have sort of divided how to govern Palestine, and it's also sort of been poorly governed. In the past 10 years, Hamas has frequently launched rocket attacks into Israel. Israel has responded with extended and extremely violent invasions of Palestinian territory that have seen thousands of Palestinians killed, many of them militants, but also many not. Both parties claim to be responding to the provocations of the other, but much of the conflict reflects a consistent failure on all sides to understand the legitimacy of the other's narrative. To Palestine, the Palestinian people have been denied a state not just since the formation of Israel, but also for decades before that, and now they live under what amounts to a military occupation. And that's all true. To Israel, the Jewish people clearly need a homeland which the United Nations established. And they certainly aren't the first nation-state to consolidate and increase their territory via military victory. And they need to protect their nation against the many active threats made against them by their neighbors. That's also true. It's important to understand the internal logic of these competing nationalist visions. For both Zionist and Palestinian national visions to eventually work, it's necessary to understand the right of each to exist and the legitimacy of each's historical narrative. But these problems aren't thousands of years old, and they aren't intractable. They emerged in the British Mandatory period. But let's hope that by understanding that this isn't an endless religious war, that we might be closer to seeing its end.
And we know that's not true, because the way that it ends is for Israel to dominate everything and for America to kind of take over the whole land. It's wild stuff, y'all. Okay, so let's get to the news, y'all. Let's get to this crazy Iran stuff. Yeah, we don't have to go to the conflict. I already kind of covered that. Okay, let's get into it.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday, and more importantly, happy Commie Takeover. Ryan, great to see you.
That's right, we got it.
Commie Takeover.
Doing good. Lots to get.
She said, "Happy Commie Takeover." This is crazy. Yeah, this is wild stuff.
This morning, we've got theoretically anyway, diplomacy happening in Geneva on the Iran front, so we'll dig into that. We've got some weird things developing with regard to Cuba. I'm hoping you can explain that to me. We have AI pushing for nuclear war, so definitely keeping our eye on that one as well. Hillary Clinton is testifying with regards to the Epstein files today, and there's been some new fallout there. Bill Gates admitting to 2 affairs with Russian women, Larry Summers out at Harvard completely, and dark money that's moving around.
The incumbent, but AIPAC had to spend more than $2 million beating her then. She's now a county commissioner. It looked like NIDA was going to beat her millions of dollars of AI money and all.
Yeah, and you definitely will want to know because it's very consequential.
It is.
How they are doing this, and says a lot.
The reason why I wanted to show this clip, because before the actual war started, they said that Trump wanted Israel to start the Iran war first, which they did the major bombing of it. But let's go into it.
About the Democratic Party. I'll just leave it at too much because of the great support you guys have shown. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get into questions of war and peace. As I said before, there is at least theoretical diplomacy going on in Geneva today. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are there. Oman is the intermediary. They are supposed to be meeting with the Iranians and trying to strike some sort of a deal. I think it is an open question all around how serious this administration is about that diplomacy, but at least theoretically, there could be some kind of an off-ramp. We're all reading the tea leaves here from various administration officials about how they are currently thinking about whether or not we will be going to war with Iran. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, on the threat that Iran poses.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild the nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically. But of course, the president has other options as well.
Ryan, anything significant that you glean from those comments?
Just that they've kind of lost even the pretense of having any respect for the public. You know, in June, they said they completely obliterated the nuclear program. But a week ago, Witkoff went on TV and said that, you know, they're now weeks away from a bomb. It's like ridiculous. And now J.D. Vance is saying, well, okay, yes, we obliterated it. And yes, there's no evidence that they're doing any enrichment or moving towards a bomb, but we have evidence that they're thinking about it. That's like.
And the truth of the matter is that now that we're seeing what's going on since the war started, you see that they obliterated the nuke problem. That's not an issue in Iran, but they missile stuff. The constant missile stuff is, they can't let them. It's like they gotta stop all that. They can't have no weapons at all. You know what I mean? It needs to be like Japan. You know, it's like crazy. They can't have no weapons at all because they was able to still damage and destroy and kill people and with rockets and missiles and stuff like that. So all that stuff need to stop. So they still was a major threat holding that. But the problem of it is why we care? Why we care what happens over there? And that's the problem. And my only problem is, if you could solve the problem without an American citizen dying or American soldier dying, then go ahead and do it. But if one American citizen dies, this is not a well thought out plan, and the value of it is not worth it. We got too much drama over here, but it's a broken society that we have in America.
What? Like, stop. But at least, now here I am being a hypocrite because I had said that I didn't like the fact that they weren't even trying to lie us into war. So at least now they're trying to lie us into war. So
yes.
I apologize. It's something. It's something at least.
It's a low bar. It's a pretty low bar.
They're at least lying to us finally. Before they were just like, we're going to do it. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, we don't really care what you think. Like, we're going to make up a
I can
variety.
tell you why,
We really care about the Iranian protesters.
Yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Great beacons of human rights here from this administration. Deep concern for those sorts of principles and values. Marco Rubio kind of sounding similar notes about, how Iran represents some grave threat to the American public. No one serious would agree with that whatsoever. But in any case, here's the Secretary of State, who's supposed to be a serious person, saying exactly that. Let's take a listen.
I think tomorrow Steve and Jared will be there. I think they're on their way there now, actually. And the president was very clear last night that he always prefers diplomacy. After their nuclear program was obliterated, they were told not to try to restart it. And here they are. You can see them always trying to rebuild elements of it. They're not enriching right now, but they're trying to get to the point where they ultimately can. The other thing I would point you to, however, is that Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. And all of our bases in the UAE and Qatar and in Bahrain. And they also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy. So I want everybody to understand that, and beyond just the nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America and attack Americans if they so choose to do so.
And he was right.
That language right there, Ryan, is really terrible because now he's raising.
Yeah, but it's accurate though. They was right. That absolutely could happen. Now it wouldn't happen if we didn't attack them, but it was an actual like play they could do.
Not only, okay, so if the focus was really on nuclear weapons, there's a deal that could be done. We know that because there already was a deal that was done previously that we walked away from. So that would be extremely doable. But when you start throwing these other things into the mix, oh, and by the way, they have ballistic missiles. This is the first time I've heard this one. By the way, they have naval assets.
They have ships.
So what, they're not allowed to have any of that? I mean, no sane government would give up all of their ability to defend themselves in any situation, let alone when they have this rogue nuclear power, superpower backed regime in the region that is constantly trying to destroy them. So it's when you start hearing that language that it becomes very dispiriting and hard to imagine how we avoid some sort of conflict.
It's like they have these magical devices that float on top of water, and we just can't. We can't allow this. Clearly, he understands the politics. And in his mind, he's saying they have these ballistic missiles that can threaten Israel. Like, that's what he's saying in his mind.
Yeah, our partners in the region, that's Israel.
But then he doesn't go there. He says, right, he leads with our bases, our American bases. Well, a couple of things. One, why do we have American bases all over the world? And does that mean, like, so if we put an American base near a country, that country has to disarm itself? That's kind of an amusing kind of proposition for the world.
They probably think about it that way.
Yeah, but you asking that question, but liberals, y'all don't want to take soldiers out of South Korea. You get what I'm saying? Take them out of Germany. I do, but liberals don't. So they talk about all this crazy stuff like they want a mass withdrawal. You know what I mean?
But yeah.
But the restrictions that are based in Qatar is right by Iran. The other bases in Iraq, etc.
Yeah.
Very much closer to Iran. And so the deal that Israel is pushing on them would still allow Iranian ballistic missiles to hit American bases, which is, I mean, just unpack that in your mind for a second. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's the
not
problem.
That anybody is remotely confused about this anymore, but if they are, just kind of sit with that one for a second.
I do want to say, I was listening to John Mearsheimer this morning in an interview with Glenn Deason, and he actually was somewhat optimistic based on Trump's comments in the State of the Union, because he didn't talk about oh my God, the naval assets and the ballistic missile, and they seem to know that. In fact, this is insane. We can put A3 up on the screen. Somebody's leaking to Politico that they believe the politics are better if Israel strikes Iran first. And here's the logic, which is the most cynical thing you can possibly imagine. They're like, all right, well, if Israel hits Iran, Iran is likely to strike back and hit us. And then maybe the American people can be more cajoled and more persuaded to directly attack Iran. So effectively, they're like, we want to jeopardize the lives and the safety of some American service members in the region in service of persuading the American public that we have to go to war.
Yeah,
but to go back to my point about the argument.
Well, if that's what their thought process was, it backfired on them. Okay, let's go to the next one.
We have major breaking news here into CNN. Israel has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Iran. That news just in from the defense minister of Israel as a state of emergency was declared across the country of Israel. The government declared the state of emergency because of the expectation of Iranian retaliation with drones and ballistic missiles. There's still a lot we do not yet know about this attack, but it comes as President Donald Trump has been considering a U.S. military action against Iran. The U.S. and Iran have been engaged in diplomatic talks for weeks now about Iran's nuclear program, are trying to reach an agreement over the matter. Let's go live right now to Cedric Layton, who is joining us. We just spoke with you a short time ago about the possibility of an attack. We were hinting that an attack was imminent, but now it appears that Israel making the first move. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right, Alex. And one of the key things here is that it looks like one of the plans that had been talked about here in Washington about Israel possibly making the first move in this particular case has actually come to fruition. So what appears to be happening is that the Israelis are striking a series of targets. We're not sure exactly which ones, but one of the guesses would be that it would be some of the ballistic missile sites would be a distinct possibility in this case. And what they're doing here, Alex, is they're trying to basically get rid of those so that they won't affect Israel, first of all. But secondly, they're also going after any air defense assets that the Iranians have. And the idea there, of course, would be to protect not only their own aircraft, but any possible U.S.
We catching you guys up.
The United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of.
I want to find out a cleaner image, because this is buffering like crazy. It looks ridiculous. I don't know what's wrong with them. Give me 1 second, y'all, so I can get a better image of it. Okay, I'm thinking I have to break this on up. So we're gonna get through this speech, and then I'm gonna stop, and we're gonna finish up the rest on the second half. So I keep the episodes within a couple hours. I don't want to have it going 3 hours and stuff like that. So here we go.
United States military. A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer.
Yeah, and it's the bad. One of the bad things about all this is that he's trying to, like I told you, he's trying to solve problems and bad decisions by Reagan, Bush father, Obama, Clinton, and Biden. He's trying to solve these problems, but to try to solve these problems, it might cost lives. You know what I mean? So we're gonna get into the details of this stuff, even the attacks of our bases and stuff like that, and then the lives of our soldiers that have been sacrificed for this overall thing. I do believe how they attacking and how they demolishing Iran, they'll be a shell of themselves. They won't have no power like they got now, but they still got a little missile power. And I don't know why they're not able to take it out without, like, send some drones in there, suicide drones that go in one way, So it's like crazy. No need for us to send F-16 F pilots that's getting shot out the air and stupid stuff. But look, we'll get to it.
From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. and it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there is no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all.
Okay. Okay. So that gives you guys a clear understanding of what pretty much the beginning of the war was. And we're going to get into the details of it and the aftermath of it and the casualties and all that stuff like that. So that we're going to do in a second part. But thanks guys for joining us. We're going to put this as a part 2 and I'm going to wrap up everything else. We're going to run through it. I just wanted to kind of show you guys the beginning of this Middle East situation and all the pretty much the nuggets of information that you need to know forever to understand it or kind of be able to kind of somewhat have a little bit of an understanding to it. So that's why I started off with the Sunni Shiites, Zionism, Palestinian and Iranian and all that stuff. You kind of understand it a little bit better now by watching the beginning of this and me walking through this, and now we're in the war. And like I told you guys, we're kind of trying to solve a problem that's over there, but we can't even solve like our Mexico issue, our Canada issue, our, you know what I mean, our South America issue. We got a lot of issues that's really taking money out of American citizens' pocket daily and putting them in, taking prosperity away from the American people daily. But look, we'll get into all that. I'll see you guys when we come back, and yeah, we're not gonna have any happy days for a while because it's a lot of sacrifice, and we gotta keep it real. My name is Daris D. McKinney. This is Individual Perspective Podcast, and I'll see you guys in the next one.